Hi, it's Anthony with Land Title. Came to bring you your Boulder County market update for the month of August. Let's look back at July data, taking a big look into really what's creating some of these market shifts. And we're definitely feeling some market change right now. Year over year, average sales price across Boulder County is showing a 10% decrease in average sales price. Now that's huge. Let's look into why, and let's look into why maybe that's not 100% accurate depending on the market you're in. So 13% more listings than this time last year. Honestly, I would have expected more than that. But the one thing you can see is that supply shifted down early. People are pulling listings off the market. We see some more expireds than we would usually see. But check this out, 14% more under contracts than this time last year. So it means buyers are still out and active, contrary to maybe where they were a year ago. Now, could that be due to prices coming down a little bit? Absolutely. Also, interest rates have been pretty stable. We're sitting around 6.6 today. That definitely was not the case last month in July, but we steadily started to see some trending downward. Could be affecting buyer behavior, even if it was a slight change in interest rates. Now, the good news here, take a look at this. Our active units are only up 26% for the year. Sold units have come up 3% from this time last year. So great news there. Let's dive into active listings, detached specifically. Okay, so the one thing I think we got to realize is, where is all of this inventory taking place at? 1,100 units on the market in the detached housing market. 400 of them are in the city of Boulder, but that market's only up 7% from last year. If you remember, we saw most of our inventory increase in Boulder last year, and sellers have started to adjust from that. Places like Erie, we're at 240. That's a 24% rise from this time last year. That market is really feeling the inventory surge, right? So that could be creating some issues there. Niwot has quite a bit more, but 27 units is still not a lot of units. It's just a smaller market, but double the inventory we saw a year ago. Everything else is kind of falling in line with that average. All right, so let's take a look at the attached market. This is the market that is really concerning to me. You can see it here. Boulder has 300 units on the market. It's still almost 12% more than it was this time last year. That market is just really struggling. Now, certain places like Longmont had a big inventory surge last year, still in a higher inventory environment, but 100 attached units in Longmont, actually less than where we were last year. Erie has less than where we were last year. Those are good news. Like Superior staying stable, that means the attached market's really adjusting, right? So we're not seeing a ton of influence and fluctuation from the inventory on there. Louisville, 30% more, but honestly, as we've seen a lot of these Marshall Fire rebuilds, Louisville has definitely seen more inventory than usual, but it's still doing well. Okay, so let's talk about month supply of inventory. What does that mean? Month supply of inventory is one of those things where, this, if nothing else comes on the market, how long does it take to sell what's available? So across Boulder County, it takes 4.5 months to sell everything that would be on the market. According to NAR, 4 to 6 months is a balanced market. I'd really argue with you in Colorado that it's closer to probably about 3 months. We're seeing so many concessions and price drops and all these things and all that downward pressure. This is very clearly not in balance. Now, where is it more prevalent than others? The city of Boulder, because of its price point, has 6 months of inventory. It's a lot of inventory. Niwot, also higher price point, 6 months of inventory. The markets that have favored the best, Lafayette, Longmont, Erie, all of those towns out in the county where a little bit more affordable price ranges, they still have, sort of around balanced market, right? 3 to 3.5 months of inventory. That's a good sign, right? Because that means people are still buying and selling out there. They just are making different decisions because of the cost of housing. Days in MLS, this is where we look at how long does it take to go under contract in a home. You got 49 days right now. If you look at some of the other markets, even in Boulder with 6 months of inventory, it's only 52 days in MLS. Now, that doesn't quite add up, right? So when you look at these and you're like, well, how is that we had 6 months of inventory or we even have 4 months of inventory, but it's taking 40 or 50 days to go under contract? It really tells me that the listings that put their best foot forward, they do all the work ahead of time to get something ready for market. They market it well. Those ones that are ready to go, right, that are priced correctly, those ones are the ones that are selling. And there is a lot of everything else sitting on the market. Niwot's a really good example. It's 17 days in average MLS last month, which means the newer listings are the ones that went under contract and everything else still sat there. So that's a tough one, but it is really important to understand that. If we look at what is happening by area or by price range in the change, not necessarily by location, but by price, we're seeing a lot more activity up at the higher end. Year to date, you can see that 2.5 to 3 million, way more sales are taking place. We're actually right in line with where we were in the luxury market. So that 3+ million market, it's really similar to where it was last year. The bulk of the market, so under 1.5 million to, let's call it, really through the end of the market, the lower end of the market, that's where you're feeling the change from interest rates, buyer behavior changes. As you've seen a little bit of price compression, people are getting frustrated and sitting on the sidelines and getting back out in the market, but it's very, very slow, right? The market that's having the most problems in Boulder County is 1.5 to 2.5, where we've seen a slowdown in sales because it's still very expensive to borrow money and people are very uncertain, right? So uncertainty in, the stock market, it definitely is creating some of this as well. If you look at it by the attached market, a little bit of a different story. The only places we're seeing some increase in activity, 600 to 1 million, a lot of that's townhouses across the county. So that would make sense. Newer townhouses would have a better chance of selling. They're going to do a little bit better than like an older condo with HOA problems. The luxury market's very similar to where it was this time last year as well. So that's a good sign. But a lot of that market has slowed down by 15 to 20%, right? So if you're talking average condo across most of the county, older product, they're really hard to sell right now, and you can feel that out there. Month supply of inventory and days on market by price range tells a little bit of a story, right? So the nice thing here is if you look at it by price range, you can see around 3 months of inventory, 4 months of inventory for anything under 1 million, still taking 40 to 50 days to go under contract. When we get up into that, more buyer-centric market where buyers have more power, it isn't that they're not selling fast, right? There's still buyers out there looking. Look at 2 to 2.5 million. It's a really good example. We have 6.6 months of inventory. There's a lot of inventory out there, but they're selling in 27 days. So it's not the stuff that's sitting a long time that's selling. It's the new product that looks nice, that's buttoned up and ready to go. I think if you're working with listings that are maybe not perfect or not great, that's where you could consider pulling them off the market and doing some work to them and then relisting them. I don't think there's any reason to pull something off the market if you think it's priced right and it's just a lack of buyers in the marketplace. Definitely some of that's happening, right? You can see 89 days in the MLS for 1.5 to 2 million, and there's 6 months of inventory. There's just a lot there, right? So if there's a lot of good stuff on the market and there's just not a lot of buyers for it, they will sell eventually. If you look at the attached market, lots more days in MLS. You can see also that the month supply of inventory is slowly sitting around 5 months of inventory for the bulk of the market. You get into the luxury market, it's very similar to what we see in detached, talking 15, 16 months. Even at 1 to 1.5 million for the attached market, we're sitting at 9 months of inventory. So much to choose from that buyers can kind of take their time and pick what they want. Now, if we look at the average sales price, this is one I really want to talk about. So detached single family, it creates the bulk of the market, right? But where is this taking place where we say, well, year over year, we're down 7%. Well, what does that really mean, right? Year over year, we're down 7%. But if we look at that, that's $1,060,000. The city of Boulder is at 1.6 million. It's down about 8% from this time last year. But if you really look over the last 12 months, it's basically flat, right? I mean, 1.66 to 1.65, right? It's fine, right? Nothing's really changed. If you look at Louisville year over year is up 4.5%. If you look at it over the last 12 months, it's up 6%. So we're selling more expensive homes in Louisville. A lot of it might just be that we're building more expensive homes as we've had those Marshall Fires rebuilds come onto the market. Somewhere like Lafayette, though, ignore the year over year number because it's a minus 17% number. But when you look at the trailing 12-month change, you're seeing it decrease in value by a little bit, right? It's down about $12,000. It's only 1.3%. Is it a good buy right now? It's probably a pretty good buy, right? I mean, it's just that market had a lot of inventory for a long time. That creates a lot of downward pricing pressure. Erie, same thing, really similar, very stable, but also came down in price just a little bit. And Longmont in the same situation, right? So you have a lot of inventory for a long time. You see price compression. It's not that big of a deal. It's just a little bit, and it will definitely take off. I think there's some really good buys out there right now in the detached market. The attached market, a little bit of a different situation, right? City of Boulder has had so much inventory for so long. Over the last 12 months, it really has seen price drops, right? Price changes. Now, this market, year over year, we're down 14.5%. That's $87,000. People are obviously buying a different product, and they're just not very interested in this. There's not as many buyers taking place in this market. This is where it gets very concerning. Look at Lafayette. It is down 11% in price. Longmont down 9.5% in price over the last 12 months. Those are really big numbers, right? So we're seeing some definitely flight to detached. We're just seeing a lot less people participate in the attached market. This is kind of an overall view. This is an easy one to share with clients if they were asking how the market's doing. You can really see here just how we stack up against last year. We've had a pretty good year over year, 2.75% up. But here's the real issue. Certain markets have done way better than others. Boulder, Louisville, Superior, Erie, Longmont, all up quite a bit. Niwot has done less, but it's luxury. And then Lafayette, that market, we've seen some of that transition in, almost 11% less sales than we saw a year ago. So definitely worth noting. All right, last slide for you. This is the list of sale price. We're sitting at 97.4%. Year over year, that's almost 1% change. So buyers are definitely holding all the cards, right? They can pick what they want. They can make aggressive offers. And as we see that take place, especially in the July market, there's plenty of years we've seen this in December, right? So this is a really tough one to swallow, right? It is very competitive out there. There's just so many sellers. Buyers can come in and pick and choose, and they can ask for the world, and you're really stuck giving it to them. This doesn't even take into account concessions, which we're seeing on like 60+% of deals under $1 million, and it doesn't take into account price drops. So this is really a staggering statistic, right? And as we're starting to see that price compression, you really feel it here, right? Even over last year, there's just more downward pressure in the marketplace. If you have any other questions, concerns, you need data to help work on listings or buyers, I'm happy to help out with that. Please reach out to me. This is Anthony at Land Title. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll catch you next time.